Hello, viewers and learners. In the series of international relations theory, I was discussing with you Marxist theory of international relations. And in this part of the lecture, I'll discuss some of the important contributions by Marxist scholars in international relations theory and in international relations as a discipline. So the first important contribution of Marxist scholar is world systems theory. The first systematic attempt to apply the ideas of Marx to the international sphere is the pamphlet that was written by Lenin himself. It was published in 1917. It was titled Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. Lenin accepted much of Marx's basic thesis, but argued the character of capitalism had changed since Marx published the first volume of Capital in 1867. So here, while agreeing with the Marx, Lenin argued that the character of international capitalism, it has changed, so it is not same, right? And that is the reason probably what Marx has said may or may not be applicable in the exact sense in case of states and international politics. Capitalism had entered a new stage, which Lenin called its highest and final stage, with the development of monopoly capitalism. Under monopoly capitalism, a two-tier structure had developed within the world economy, with a dominant core exploiting a less developed periphery. So here under monopoly capitalism, at its highest stage where monopoly capitalism will develop, capitalism will divide into two tiers, and in the two tiers the world will be divided between core and periphery. Now here the core countries will exploit, dominate the peripheral states. With the development of a core and periphery, there was no longer an automatic harmony of interest between all workers. So Lenin here argued that the harmony of interest, which was sometimes presented as a counter to what Marx has said regarding class conflict, will not be there when the highest stage of capitalism will come, because in that highest stage of capitalism, a division will be there not only among the states between, say, core countries and peripheral countries, but that division will also be there in the working class. It means those who are working in the core countries and those who are working in the peripheral countries. So their conditions, their wages, right, the kind of socio-economic securities that can be provided to them, they will be different. It will create a division between the working class. So that thing may not be applicable, like all the workers, they have a common interest and they can unite for a common cause. Why? Because of the changing nature of capitalism. Lenin's views were developed by Latin American dependency school scholars, particularly Rolf Prebisch. He argued that countries in the periphery were suffering as a result of what he called the declining terms of trade. He suggested that the price of manufactured goods increased more rapidly than that of raw materials. Now this is something important here, because Rolf Prebisch has argued that a kind of dependency relationship emerged between certain countries around the world. Here some countries will dictate the terms or determine the character or conditions or even the norms or rules of exchange, while other countries, they have to agree to it. Rolf Prebisch called it the declining terms of trade, which are unequal, biased, exploitative in nature, and he suggested that if you see an increase in the manufactured goods around the world over the period of time, an increase in price of the manufactured goods, it has increased more rapidly in comparison to raw materials. It means that countries which are manufacturing something, developed countries with higher industrialization, they are going to gain more from that economic exchange, because the countries which are supplying them raw materials, their prices are not increasing in proportion to the prices of manufactured goods. These arguments were later on further developed by writers such as Andre Gunder Frank and Cardoso, Henry Fernando Cardoso. So these views were later on further extended, and developed by other scholars. The second important contribution of Marxist scholars is, which is known as Gramscianism. It is Marxist theory that has emerged from the works of Italian Marxist scholar Antonio Gramsci. So Antonio Gramsci played a very, very important role in making Marxism relevant under changed circumstances. In his prison notebooks that he has written in 1971, Gramsci has tried to explore as to why it had proved to be so difficult to promote revolution in Western Europe. Marx, after all, had predicted that revolution and the transition to socialism would occur first in the most advanced capitalist societies. But in the event, it was the Bolshevik of comparatively backward Russia that had made the first breakthrough. So Gramsci was trying to analyze this particular thing, that what Marx has said, how it proved to be wrong. What changes came in the economic systems or in the structure of Western societies that had made the revolution first come in Russia rather than in Britain. So he has analyzed that. While all the subsequent efforts by putative revolutionaries in Western Europe and Central Europe to emulate their successes has ended in failure. So even after the success of Bolshevik revolution, all the countries where they have tried to bring a similar kind of revolution, even they failed in Western Europe and Central Europe. So it provoked Gramsci to study the conditions and to study the reasons why it actually happened. Gramsci's answer revolves around his use of the concept of hegemony. For Gramsci, hegemony reflects his conceptualization of power. In understanding how the prevailing order was maintained, Marxists had concentrated almost exclusively on the coercive practices and capabilities of the state. Now, Gramsci here was having a different perspective. Generally, we believe that power is something that revolves around coercive practices. It means that you should have the power to coerce, right? You should have military power. You should have the power to compel, right? So, most of the Marxist thinking, it was primarily focusing on the coercive practices and capabilities of the state, but Gramsci's conceptualization of power was something different. Gramsci recognized that while this characterization may have held true in case of less developed societies, such as, say, pre-revolutionary Russia, it was not the case in the more developed countries of the West, because the conditions in Russia and the conditions in other Western societies were different. Here the system was also maintained through consent. So this was the argument of Gramsci. In case of Western European countries, the system was actually maintained through consent. It was not based on merely on force or coercive power. Consent is created and recreated by the hegemony of the ruling class in society. It is this hegemony that allows the moral, political and cultural values of the dominant group to become widely dispersed throughout societies and to be accepted by subordinate groups and classes as their own. So Gramsci here has interpreted the concept of hegemony. He said that hegemony was time and again created and recreated by the ruling class. So hegemony has a direct relationship with the ruling class. Now this hegemony is not based only on hard power, right? It allows moral, political and cultural values of the dominant group of the society to become so popular, right, that all the members, all other members of the society, or even the subordinate groups, those who are probably a victim of those values, they will accept them as their own. So when you accept something, there are less likely chances that you will oppose it. This takes place through the kind of various institutions of civil society. The network of institutions and practices that enjoys some autonomy from state, for example, the media, or say the education system, churches, various voluntary organizations, etc., they also played a very important critical role in popularizing those values and perpetuating the system that was already existing. They make those values acceptable to people. Marxist theory, according to Gramsci, needs to take superstructural phenomena seriously. It means what is happening in the superstructure, why it is happening, how it is happening, what are the forces that make it happen. It should also be taken seriously along with the base, because the nature of relations in the superstructure are of great relevance in determining how susceptible that society is to change and transformation. So suppose if at the superstructural level, the values are immensely popular and acceptable to the entire population of a particular society, then you cannot introduce any kind of revolutionary change in that society. Even if you try, it is bound to fail. Right? So what kind of transformation is required in a society, or what kind of change is required in a society, or whether even a change is required in a society or not, it will be largely determined by the changes in the superstructure, or the values that a superstructure is propagating, promoting, and its larger acceptability by the masses. Gramsci used the term historic bloc to describe the mutually reinforcing and reciprocal relationships between the socio-economic relationships at the base level and political and cultural practices at the superstructural level that together underpin a given order. Gramsci argued for a counter-hegemonic struggle in civil society, in which the prevailing hegemony is undermined, allowing an alternative historic bloc to be constructed. Now, in order to deal with this kind of a hegemonic setup that is prevailing in, say, Western democratic societies, a counter-hegemonic struggle is something that is suggested by Gramsci to change the conditions or to change the value preferences in the society, so that a possible revolution or a larger transformation can be made possible. Another important contribution of Marxist scholar in IR is by Robert Cox and his unique analysis of world order. Robert Cox was a Canadian scholar. He has developed a Gramscian approach that evolved both a critique of prevailing theories of international relations and international political economy, and also try to develop an alternative framework for the analysis of world politics. In his seminal 1981 article, Social Forces, State and World Orders, Beyond International Relations Theory, one sentence, which has become one of the most often quoted lines in all the contemporary international relations theory, reads as follows: "Theory is always for someone and for some purpose." Here it means that theories are not objective, theories are not neutral, theories serve a purpose, theories have an objective, theories are built or constructed to serve that purpose. Right? So we should not believe that theories are neutral and they are based on some kind of neutral analysis. He has argued that if ideas and values are ultimately a reflection of a particular set of social relations and are transformed as those social relations are themselves transformed, then this suggests that all knowledge of this social world at least must reflect a certain context, a certain time, a certain space. Here Robert Cox basically argued that the knowledge that has been created, it is specific to time and place. So at what time that knowledge has been created, and in which country, at what place that knowledge is created. So here, in a way, he questioned the universality of knowledge. According to him, knowledge cannot be objective and timeless in the sense that some contemporary realist scholars would like to claim. So knowledge is not something which is universal, knowledge is not something which is timeless, knowledge cannot be objective because it is created in a certain context at at a certain point of time, at a particular place. According to Robert Cox, realism or neorealism theories are for serving the interest of those who prosper under the prevailing order, that is, the inhabitants of the developed states and in particular the ruling elites. So Robert Cox here argued that all the dominant theories of international relations, realism, neorealism, other theories, etc., they have been created to serve or protect the interest of the ruling elites. Now their interest lies in status quo. So they don't want any kind of change. And these theories in a way play an important role in say addressing the conditions which may question that status quo. So their purpose, according to Robert Cox, whether conspicuously or not, whether consciously or not, is to reinforce and legitimate the status quo. So these theories played an important role in legitimizing the status quo so that any kind of change or even a demand for a change can be handled. Cox contrasts problem-solving theory, that is, theory which accepts the parameters of the present order and thus helps legitimate an unjust and deeply iniquitous system, with critical theory. So Robert Cox here presented an alternative to that problem-solving theory. And that alternative is critical theory. Critical theory attempts to challenge the prevailing order by seeking out, analyzing, and wherever possible, assisting social processes that can potentially lead to emancipatory changes. According to Cox, successive dominant powers in the international system have shaped a world order that suits their interest, and have done so not only as the result of their coercive capabilities, but also because they have managed to generate broad consent for the order even among those who are disadvantaged by it. So because of that relationship in core and because of that relationship in a hegemonic system whereby certain values are being popularized, the same thing has been done by the Western countries, by the rich countries. So what they have done is that they have popularized certain values. They have convinced the entire population of the world that they are in the common interest of all. So in a way, what was exclusively in their interest, they have used mass media and other popular means and spread that knowledge, popularize those values, and convince even those who are getting, who are being discriminated or who are being exploited because of that. So they have convinced them that they are in the common interest of all. Here Robert Cox, he has analyzed two hegemons primarily, United Kingdom and the United States. And the hegemonic idea in these two kingdoms was free trade. And the claim was that this system benefits everybody. And it has been popularized so widely that it has been accepted as a common sense status. So every country, every individual, they have accepted this thing that free trade is something which is in the common interest of all. But the reality is that this free trade is very much in the interest of the hegemon, or it is very much in the interest of these developed countries. Another important contribution by Marxist scholars is critical theory. Both Gramscianism and critical theory have their roots in Western Europe of the 1920s and 1930s, a place and a time in which Marxism was forced to come in terms not only with the failure of a series of attempted revolutionary uprisings, but also with the rise of fascism. So during 1920s and 30s, a number of changes came in Europe. For example, fascism emerged and became popular in Europe. Similarly, many socialist uprisings, they failed. They failed to, impress people, and they failed to achieve success. So that gap needs to be filled. That where that gap is coming, why the Marxist theory is not being able to achieve its broader objectives. So there is a clear difference in terms of focus between the two strands, with those who influenced by Gramsci tending to be much more concerned with issues relating to the subfield of international, much more concerned with issues relating to the subfield of international political economy than critical theorists. On the other hand, critical theorists, they have involved themselves with questions concerning international society, international ethics, and international security. So, those who are influenced by Gramsci, they are more concerned about the issues of international political economy. So, they want to address them. On the other hand, critical theorists, their primary focus was international society, international ethics, international security, its changing nature, character, dynamics, etc. Critical theory developed out of the work of Frankfurt School during 1920s and 30s. As left-wing German Jews, the members of the school were forced to exile by the Nazis, rise to power in the early 1930s, and much of their most creative work was produced in the United States. The leading lights of the first generation of Frankfurt schools included Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, Herbert Marcuse. A subsequent generation has taken up the legacy of those thinkers and developed it importantly and innovative ways. The best known is Jürgen Habermas, who is regarded by many as the most influential of all the contemporary social theorists. Another important contribution by Marxist scholar in international relations is critical security studies. Critical security studies, the name is given to a kind of trend in the study of security issues that has gained prominence in recent years, particularly through the work of Keith Cross and Mike Williams, Ken Booth, Richard Wynne Jones. Critical security studies, it combines influence from Gramscianism and critical theory with aspects of peace research and the so-called alternative defense thinking. So critical security studies, they have started analyzing the current condition from a different perspective. They have rejected, or you can say questioned, the very dominant hypothesis, very dominant arguments that are presented both by liberal scholars and by realist scholars regarding international relations. So they have given a new perspective, a new dimension, a new interpretation, and they are known for developing an alternative defense thinking, because sometimes what has been presented to us, largely it is up to us, or say the players, whether they want to accept it as a reality or not. It is just like realist scholars, they have presented certain things regarding international relations which cannot be escaped, right? For example, that power is the main thing, or every state they have to pursue their national interest, or every country they have to enhance their power or security capabilities to protect their national interest, or every country should grow, or for example, say international organizations, they cannot in a way supersede the sovereignty of a state. So there are certain things which has been popularized as universal values that are unescapable by the realist scholars, but critical security studies and the scholars associated with it, they have argued that it is up to the state whether they accept it or not, or whether they are having a different perspective about it or not. Another thing is what kind of solution they want to suggest if there are any crises existing. First of all, you can question even whether any kind of crisis is there or not. Second thing is that how that crisis is to be resolved. Critical security studies, it provides an alternative strategy for that. Critical security studies refuses to accept that the state is the natural object of analysis. It means that they accept that there are many other institutions which are important. They have also argued that states are part of the security problem rather than a provider of security, because the popular notion is that state provides the security. But this is also true simultaneously that states also endanger security of different other states and the people, those who are living in that. Another important thing that was highlighted by the scholars associated with critical security studies, so they place individual human beings at the center of their analysis. So rather than looking at on some kind of a group or a border group or majority of people or state, making them as their unit of analysis, they have given importance to individual human beings. It means every individual is important, or every individual life or their well-being is important. Another important contribution of Marxist scholars is New Marxism. Justin Rosenberg and Benno Tushke, who have used key elements of Marx's writing to critique other theoretical approaches to international relations and globalization theory. So they have also contributed in Marxism, or making it more relevant in present times, and given a new interpretation of it, right? Because time and again, every ideology, it tries to reinterpret itself according to time and changed scenarios. Similarly, there is a long list of scholars and their contributions within Marxism that has tried to address some of the contemporary problems with a unique insight. So they have come up with some innovative solutions to the problems which are existing, right? And their analysis, it is not superficial in nature. So they have in-depth analysis, and they focus on the forces which are operating behind state actions or state behavior. So this was like Marxism or Marxist scholars' contribution to international relations, or this is Marxist theory, and Marxist theoreticians, they have contributed immensely to international relations. It's an ongoing trend, and it is still continuing. So with this, we come to an end to this lecture. Thank you.